in as well as a little bit, which is an important tool, works even remotely with tech. Whether you're working as a designer, design at a small startup in Mumbai, they're called Agraya, and voice platforms like Alexa and Google Assistant. And we also specialize in building tech in India's country. Startups program where Google finds, incubates, and accelerates prominent startups in India. The first part of today's talk is going to be about community. Now, if you here's a quick primer. Uh, Community is anything. So, as, as people who are working in tech in this discipline, it's about a lot more. And the picture you're seeing right now, that is community. That is the Google developer group that we run, where in addition to just working, the spread of knowledge, the importance of teaching each other, the exploration of newer technologies together, all that is an important part of one's career. Now, you're probably thinking, what do the bigger question, which is why? Uh, yeah. So, what Google developer groups are about? So, about once a month, before the whole world decided to stop working, once a month we used to get together to hold a short series of talks, a variety of topics, group discussions on things that affect our day-to-day lives, and that spirit of coming together every month, it's more than just attending talks and text like conferences. If you take a step back and try to figure out what, as a developer or as anyone working any kind of job, uh, the first thing is being open to criticism, whether it's constructive or destructive criticism. uh, that is left to the imagination, but being open to take it, especially being knowing how to handle when someone tells you your products aren't great, is an important part of any career. Not being a one man show is also important, because if you were to take, it's both important for you as well as for the company, because as a person, if you were to take a lot of responsibility on yourself, it's going to overburden you. But even as a company and as a product team, handing too much responsibility to one person is only going to prove detrimental, because in case that one person decides to take a day off or leave or has his hands full, it's going to result in work not getting done. And lastly, asking for feedback and taking responsibility. A lot of us, especially in Indian culture, we don't have the habit of asking for feedback. We typically just work and then deliver what's expected of us toward the end of the timeline. But having a continuous feedback process where we ask people for help, uh, ask people for their opinions on what you're doing, and then continuously improve work before the deadline is also super important. Now, it's very likely that you can't do all this within an organization, because it's possible that your coworkers are either too busy, uh, they're on different teams and have their hands full with something else. You don't want people in your company to know where you're lacking, or simply because you don't see your coworkers as someone with enough experience to help you, and that's where community comes in. Having a range of developers of varying experiences in technology and varying experience levels coming together every month satisfies all the three criteria that we talked about in the earlier slide. It brings people together so you can talk about things, challenges that you're facing, problems that problems that are coming up in your day-to-day work, feedback that you're looking for from someone more experienced. Uh, it creates a network and a platform where at any given time you know someone in the group around you who is extremely experienced at a particular technology, and rather than searching for minutes or hours on online or on Stack Overflow, you can just reach out to the person and ask them for help. You have enough confidence or enough experience, you can be that person who goes up on stage and gives other people help. It doesn't always have to be a taking thing. It's equally important for there to be a giving relationship in any community. Lastly, that spirit of sharing and encouragement that it fosters is important because growing alone is when you grow alone, only you will grow, and as a result, only your company will grow. But that sharing and encouragement that the community brings to any developer groups is important because everyone gets better. Less mistakes all around, less time for figuring out things that are already solved, and more time solving problems that actually matter. And the spirit of community is not just on meetups. I spoke a lot about groups that come together in Mumbai every month, but it's not just about coming to those meetups. The whole community spirit goes way beyond all of that. It involves things like open source code, not necessarily being able to write and contribute to open source code, but even just sharing code across developers. It could be snippets, it could be entire modules, and contributing to that uh, helps you give back to the community, as well as makes your own experience even better because the things that you're working on you're sharing with everyone else. And any learning curve is best learned by reading and then by doing. And here you're doing aside from work, so you learn even better. Speaking is important. Not everyone who speaks at tech conferences is someone who has 5 or 10 years of experience. At the Google group in Mumbai, we've had people who are still in college, who are with 1 year experience, 6 months experience. Everyone can be a speaker because it's very likely that one that you are good at something that everyone's not good at. It could be any niche technology, or it could be that even your experiences that you have gone through, even if you don't know something unique or something better, the experiences that you have gone through so far are compelling enough to tell a story to the community around you. Mentoring, when you've reached some level of experience, uh, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 4 years, whenever you see fit that you are in a position to help others, the mentoring part of community kicks in. Because when you are in a the stage that you are right now, whether you're in third year or final year or even lower than that, you would benefit immensely from someone who is senior dedicating a few minutes or even an hour of their day to you to help you out with any problems that you might have, to give you guidance or advice. And you might be in that taking position right now, but don't forget all the people who help you now. And when going forward, when you get a chance, you'll be in that position to help. It doesn't necessarily have to be college students, but it can also be people with equivalent or lesser or even more experience than you. And if that's not your thing, if people is not your thing, if going on stage and speaking is not your thing, or you're not that good at writing open source code, even just blogging about your experiences or something unique that you learned or came across is more helpful than you realize, because the next person who comes across the same problem or ends up in the same challenge as you, when they Google the answer instead of hunting for it like you had to, they can just read your blog instead and save time and effort. So even just something as simple as writing a blog is an immense part of giving back to the community. But that is community. And moving on to the more important part of today's talk is design thinking. Now, when you hear of the term design thinking, you're probably thinking it's something like visual design or the way things look and work. And the core essence of it is that it's completely opposite. Because design thinking has almost nothing to do with how things look, but more to do with how things work. And it helps people make that transition. Because if you start working on a product right now, whether it's an app or a business idea or even a side project, your thought process is something like, I'm going to build this, and then I'm going to make people want it. And that's the completely wrong approach to go about things. Because asking people to want things that you're passionate about isn't going to make them decide that they suddenly want to use it, and it takes a considerable amount of effort to change their opinion on that. Rather, design thinking is a process of changing your mindset, where instead of doing making people want the things that you build, you make things that people want. You identify problems and challenges that people are undergoing in their day-to-day lives, and you start building solutions for those problems rather than the problems that you think people are facing. That transition is super important because it can be the make or break difference between any product that's built. And while I understand that it doesn't, you're probably thinking that it doesn't mean design. What does this have to do with design? But so far, you have been educated to think that design is just about how it looks. But if you're looking at it on a very broad scale, design is much more than that, and it's a very broad term. When you think about it, design is just about working and feelings and perception of a product, right back to uh, formulating a problem. It's all that. It's not just how it looks or feels to people. Most commonly, it's just confused with visual design. Which, like I mentioned, if you tell anyone you're a designer, they're gonna think uh, you do something with visuals. But the important concept to understand is that design is it's not just what it looks like or feels like. Sometime back, there was this motto going around that design is not what it looks like; it's what it feels like. But there's even one more step to go higher. It's about how it works, not just look and feel. And a good example for this is some of you probably own a car or have sat in a car and have seen how it's difficult to take a car key or even a bike key, put it in the ignition, and turn it. It's a significant amount of effort that's needed for that, as opposed to something like push button, where you just press one button and your car starts. So, if you were talking about design in the traditional sense, designing a car key would involve changing the shape or color or feel of the key. But if you're talking about design in the sense that we are talking about it, where design is about how it works, it would involve a complete redesign of the whole car experience, changing it to a push button experience rather than a key. And this leads back to the problem statement that design thinking is about user centered approach to problem solving. What that means is that in everything, any product that you build, any step that you take, you think about what people would want, what makes people's lives easier, and ultimately what helps them spend less time doing menial things and more time doing meaningful things. Once you have that clarity in mind, you take a next step and build a solution for it. As a result, it's less about thinking and more about doing. You spend less time thinking about how the product will work and more about prototyping a variety of things, trying out a variety of options, and seeing what people like most. The key elements to any design thinking process are four. One, it's people centered. At the center of any design thinking process, you put people. You try to understand that any problem that you're solving, how will the average person feel in that situation? What are they trying to do? What's the easiest way to help them do that? And how can you, as a developer or as a designer, improve their situation by removing any sort of roadblocks rather than by just building what you feel you want to build. Second element is it's a highly creative process, because if you look at any revolutions across tech history, whether it was the invention of AR or VR, any problems that they possibly solved, they solved in a highly creative manner, because just thinking in along narrow lines and restricting yourself and your thought process to the mentality that whatever solutions you come up with have to be similar to current implementations. That's not what design thinking is about. Design thinking is about thinking outside the box and designing products that aren't conventional but are aimed at solving people's needs. It's hands on. You can't just design for products on paper or on a computer. You need to go in the field, understand what people are going through, and then take away from their experiences. Uh, a good example for this is, so I don't know. Uh, about 3 to 4 years ago, I was involved to some extent in designing the brand experience for a product I'm sure almost every one of you has heard about, which was M Indicator. It's used by, I'd say, not every, but almost every person living in Mumbai at least minimum once in a day. And while designing that, we couldn't, the team that I work with at M Indicator, we couldn't just sit in an office on a computer and solve problems for people who weren't in that situation. What we instead had to do was go to a train station, stand on a platform, see what the average person is going through on their daily commute, on their daily journey in a train, right from getting on, stepping into the train station, to finding the next train they have to take, to actually stepping into the train and then getting off. That entire journey had to be experienced. It couldn't be done inside an office. It was a very hands-on experience. And lastly, it's iterative. You're almost certain to not get the perfect solution right away. If you do, you're probably wrong and you have some bias influencing you. Design thinking is about rapidly coming up with a variety of solutions, uh, each one better than the previous one, and ultimately you come up with a solution where everyone whom you test it with says that yeah, this is the right one. That iterative process helps you get from a product that was good for you, whereas now you're at a product that's good for the people you use. The deep diving into each of those processes. The people centric process, while I talk about in brief, the thing that you need to understand is that everyone in the certain situation has a variety of motivations. And going back to my previous example, everyone opening up the app, we weren't sure whether they were definitely going to use it to look up a train timetable. They could be doing anything from looking up routes to looking up fares, or even perhaps dealing with a complete different mode of transport. So if we had kept the default screen to directly to a train timetable, it would be reflective of what the business's primary goal is, but it wouldn't necessarily indicate that it's what people want. Having empathy towards your users and understanding that it's not about you, it's about their situation and their feelings, because ultimately you loving the product is a bias that you have. But if people love your product, then it's definitely going to be successful. So having that sense of empathy and understanding the user's feelings, situations, and surroundings in any particular scenario is key to the people-centric process. Uh, when I talk about highly creative, it's necessary to, like I said, it's necessary to think out of the box, but it's about more about integrative thinking. Integrative thinking is nothing but looking at a solution and saying that this is not the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to think of something that's maybe 10 times more crazy. You think of the most wild or out of the box problem or solution that you can ever have for the problem. Maybe it's not feasible, maybe it's not implementable, maybe it just sounds crazy. But going to those extremes and then coming backwards from there helps you come up with more creative solutions than you would have if you were to work a straight process. Because thinking in extremes helps you eliminate the bias that you have from existing solutions. Uh, in addition to hands on, failure is, I'd say it's not something that always happens, but If it does, it's a necessary part of the process. What you're doing as creators, whether you're a designer or a developer or an entrepreneur, you're a creator, and what you're doing as creators is you're not taking something and making sure it's done perfectly. At every stage, you're experimenting and you're going through a trial and error process. So, failing at something, whether it's a new version of a product or an entire product, it's not the end, because from any failure, there are a bunch of key takeaways and understandings that you're going to have, and those understandings are going to help shape the next iteration of your product. And more importantly, the mistakes that you make the first time, you're never going to make them again, because now you have a better understanding of how people are feeling and thinking, and you can avoid all possible problems that will put them in a situation which they don't want to be. uh, every like I said, it has to be iterative. The road to success is not straight. The more iterations you go through, the more number of times you fail and create something new and test it out again, the more refined your product is going to be. And chances are that the higher number of iterations you go through, the higher likelihood that when you do go to market, people are going to prefer it to, as opposed to something that just comes out of your straight out of your computer and goes in people's hands. Google Ventures, which is Google's VC arm, has come up with something called a design sprint model, where everything you build, it could be a semester project for you, or it could be a large scale company idea that you're coming up with. Everything you build goes through four stages, which is you ideate, then you build, then you launch, and then you learn. But if you go down that typical path, you spend a lot of time, money, and effort building an entire product. And then when you launch it, and the learnings you get from people might show that you were on the wrong path all along. Instead, what Google Ventures proposes is that when you come up with an idea, you build a prototype. You don't build the entire product. You don't just get an app idea and go ahead and start making it. You talk to people about the idea. You talk to people about the implementation, what possible solution you're aiming to solve, how you're going to solve it. It could be a simple conversation with someone you know. It could be a sketch or a drawing or something that you have in mind. But talking to people who are going to use your product, getting their insights before you start building it, will help you avoid the entire process and wastage of time and effort and money which you would have traditionally done. This way, you don't make any mistakes. You get a lot of the things that you need to change early on. Then you take those learnings, and then you then go to your laptop with them and then start building. So instead of looking something like this, where initially you just have a squiggle of things which makes absolutely no sense, and then halfway towards the product launch is when you get some idea of what you want to do, and you get the clarity and focus that you need. So instead of having that mess that you have at the beginning, you follow the Google Ventures proposed model, where you learn a lot and then you go ahead and build. Okay. Uh, I spoke about a lot of theory, but a little bit of insight on how you would actually go ahead and apply a design thinking model to your day-to-day life. And we're going to talk about when it can be helpful. The ideal use case for design thinking is a certain type of problem called wicked problems. These are typically problems that are ill defined, where you don't specifically know what you're solving for. A good example of this is, you know, Bombay's roads get flooded almost every monsoon. Now, you know one of the possible causes is poor drainage, but then you also know that it's possibly due to some low-lying areas, or due to uh, and then accidents being caused by poorly maintained road. There are a variety of things And building a solution with only to accept one of those problems isn't really optimal. You need to understand the entire situation. You need to understand that there is no one concrete problem defined. Exploring every possible thing that is contributing to the problem and then coming up with a solution for it is an ideal use case for design thinking. Additionally, if you're working at a large organization that is not traditionally inclined to doing something risky or to outside its comfort zone, in such situations also design thinking is useful, because if you're coming up with a solution that you think your manager or your team isn't going to like, you don't spend time and effort building that solution, but rather you get validation on your proposed idea beforehand. And then if you're getting people's positive responses and opinions, only then do you actually go ahead and build it. However, the important thing is that not every problem requires design thinking. If you read about it and you dive into how the process works, it sounds like an ideal solution for almost every problem. However, it can't be universally applied. It's mostly for creative, intuitive, and emotional processes. But for some questions, uh, whether they're legal or business questions or acquisitions, that you can't do design thinking in that. Understanding that it's a limitation that can only be applied in some problems, uh, it's key, because then you're using it, but you're not overstepping and trying to use it everywhere. So figure out what kind of problems would benefit most from uh, a user intervened process, and what problems wouldn't really make sense to get people's feedback on. Apply design thinking to the first type and keep it away from the second type. Yeah. Lastly, when you're applying design thinking, it should be feasible as well as viable. Factor in that innovation is it's made up of three primary things. It has to be viable for the business that's implementing it. It has to be feasible by the technology that's going to be used to build it, and people have to actually want it. If you remove any one of these three factors, it doesn't work. Something that people want and businesses want, but technology can't implement, is never going to see the light of day. Something that businesses want and technology can implement, people aren't going to want it. It's going to end up complete failure. And something that people want and technology can build, but a business isn't going to invest money or time into it, is again probably never going to see the light of day. Okay. Now, actually, implementing this process in your day-to-day life. Let's zoom in a little bit on how that process looks. Uh, there's no one size fits all approach. If you were implementing design thinking for your semester project, it's going to look very different from a design thinking approach for a large organization or a large company or even an individual developer. There isn't one answer for everything. The general understanding is that it's important to get people's feedback. That is the core meaning of it. uh, Taking design thinking processes that are built for different teams, organizations, products, or even categories, and then trying to apply it to your situation isn't ideal. However, there is a 5-step process from Stanford's design school, one of the best design institutions in the world, which is outlines each of the steps that you need to take to have a proper design process. While the specifics of the process, that is, whether you go on field or whether you talk to people, are left to your imagination. Broadly following these 5 steps ensures that you're checking every box and meeting all the criteria that a typical design thinking process requires. The first step in that is empathize, understanding who you're building your problem for. When I say get people's feedback and opinions, Getting opinions from the wrong kind of people is severely going to bias how your final product looks. If you're building an app that's meant for farmers or for people from rural areas, and then you ask your friends and family to take a look at it, you're going to get very different feedback that's different from the reality. The friends and family are probably going to say that it looks excellent, it works excellent, they can understand it completely. But when you take it to your actual audience, let's say in this example, a farmer, an entire new set of problems might come up. It could be everything from draining too much battery on their phones to not working on a slow internet connection or not being available in regional languages. The reality is very different from what your original audience gave you as a feedback. So, empathizing with your users, understanding their realities uh, through observing their day to day lives, engaging with them in conversations, and understanding how they go about things. It could be something as simple as giving them a phone and asking them to turn on Wi Fi. It could be a very different journey from you doing it. You might probably pull down the notification share on your phone and click the button there. But someone who's unfamiliar with a phone probably doesn't know that exists. So they're going to open the app drawer, go to settings, then go to Wi-Fi, and then turn it on. So that journey to get there changes from a one-click journey to like a 6 or 7 click journey. And as a result, the journey for both looks very different. So understanding your user and empathizing with them is important to the process. Next, defining the problem by the understanding that you got from the people. So define the three things that you define are: one, the type of user you're building for, where you understand their realities, their context, their limitations, and their preferences. Second, you define their needs. Don't build You wouldn't build something that they don't need. So defining their needs, what is important for them, what is critical for them to carry out their day-to-day functioning, uh, define that and stick to those, and understand which of those needs you want to fulfill as a niche and build for those ones. Third, you express insights, where everything that you learned from your interactions with your audience, uh, whether it was through observations or through question and answers or through just even through stories, defining those insights will also help you shape up for the next stage of your product, which is ideate. Now, ideate is possibly the most time consuming phase of this entire process. In this stage, you come up with ideas that are possible solutions for the problem that you chose to decide. It could be simple ideas, it could be complicated ideas, but the importance is you have a variety of ideas. The more possible solutions you come up with, the better. You don't have to come up with one solution because there's going to be a bias in that one solution. So you translate those problems into solutions. You bring in your creativity, your group synergy, and both these things play a very important factor in coming up with realistic ideas. Now, if I was able to do this talk in person, it would have been different because the last time I gave a similar talk, one of the questions that I asked this audience was, if you were to break a friend of yours out of prison, what what would you do? What method would you use? And the answers were very varied. There was one person who said, I'd give the traditional answer of I'd hide a knife in a cake. And I think the most extreme answer that I heard was, I find out who runs the prison and blackmail them. So the the takeaway being that almost, I mean, I hope nobody in the room was even remotely familiar with how to break out of prison, but everyone came with their own unique set of ideas, either through their creativity, through their imagination, or through their experiences. So when you're coming up with ideas, don't think that only people who are familiar with the problem can come up with ideas. It could be your friend or your mom or even your maid who comes up with an idea that might work better than anyone else. So don't leave anyone out. Try to take possible solutions from everyone you can. The more insights and variety you get, the better it's going to help you in the next phase. Once you have these ideas ready, you probably have listed them down somewhere in a document or on a piece of paper. The next step is you build these ideas. Now, when I say build, I don't mean the traditional process of getting on a laptop, opening up a code editor, and building an entire piece of software. The key here is to be able to test each and one of those ideas, because explaining a solution to your target audience doesn't give them an exact representation of how you plan to do things. Building something as simply, cheaply, and fast as you possibly can is the way to go. Now, that could turn out into a wide variety of things based on what you're most familiar with. It could be something as simple as a drawing on a pieces of paper, or it could be an interactive prototype made on the web. The importance is that you're getting something visual. It doesn't matter if it's paper quality or web quality, but you're helping your audience have get an understanding of how the product is going to look when it's eventually built with code. And they're getting a storyboard sense where they go through a journey from, say, a login to a checkout. And helping people get that understanding is key here. Once you have all these prototypes built in, perhaps the most important phase that comes in is testing, where you go back to the audience that you met in the first stage, your target audience, and you show them the prototypes that you came up with. Either you let them walk their way through the drawings that you did on paper, or attempt to perform a transaction on your web prototype, but giving your possible solutions in their hands and seeing how they use it, what questions they ask, what challenges they face, and the experiences that they undergo on every stage of the product. Those insights that you get will help you loop back. You go back to the ideation phase of your problem with the insights that you got from your last test. You come up with more ideas, and then you go through this entire process of coming up with ideas, building them, and testing them multiple times until you come to a stage where the feedback is only positive, or you have a certain degree of confidence that your product is where you want it to be. uh, how it benefits institutions, and by this I don't mean education institutions, but rather companies and teams. It helps you innovate. If you were to walk through a traditional process of coming up with solutions, it's going to be a little bland. uh, it's not going to end up looking as possibly as varied as you initially wanted it. uh, the wild thinking approach that we thought of in stage 3, it helps you come up with out of the box solutions, and something that you didn't expect to work might end up working better. Additionally, the lean approach uh, allows you to be highly creative and test a wide variety of solutions with quick validation of those concepts with your target audience. It also helps you differentiate from competition, especially when most traditional teams and competitions are still not completely come on board with the design thinking process and are going about the traditional way of sitting in a meeting room, coming up with solutions, and going ahead and building the solutions before taking feedback. Not everyone, most people are still on that traditional process. Undertaking a design thinking process sets you apart and helps you build better products faster. The key motto for takeaways is that serving is selling, which kind of reinforces that consumer centric perspective that we talked about, where if your product or your idea is built primarily with the focus to serve consumers, it might not be what the business completely wants, But if people want it and people can use it, and it's solving a problem in their day-to-day lives, it's definitely going to sell. And if things sell, business needs are automatically fulfilled. And of course, as a result, it also increases customer satisfaction, because now people are getting products that they want and are built for them, and not products that businesses wanted. As a result, retention is much higher, because if people are getting things that they want on your platform, and not and as opposed to on a competitor getting things that are built a traditional way, they're going to stay longer, or stay have more engagement with your idea. As a result, people are retained more. They are less likely to uninstall or stop using a product. So, in summary, the first step is that design thinking is a user-centered approach to problem solving. Uh, it moves away from the traditional model of coming up with an idea and then building it. It involves empathy and putting people first. It's especially helpful for problems that are ill-defined, or problems that are new and outside the traditional scope of working. The entire process involves a step-by-step process of over multiple iterations, where in you follow the five phases of defining, or of realizing who you're building for, defining them and their needs, and then going through the iterative process of coming up with ideas, prototyping them, and then testing them with your target audience. The entire design thinking process lies importantly in the last three phases, where you rapidly come up with solutions and see how they would work with your audience. Uh, Design thinking is about doing. It's less about thinking and more about going on the field, empathizing with people, and doing what they would do to better understand the problems that average people face. I I'm reachable either via email or on Twitter, and I I can specifically help you with problems related to design, community, and user experience. Please feel free to reach out to me, and if you have any questions now, I'd be happy to take any. Okay, couple of you have had questions. The first one is, how can a first year student join the Google developer group? Uh, we're on meetup.com. If you search for GDG MAD, which stands for Mumbai App Developers, uh, you'll find us there. All you need to do is just click on the join button and you'll be subscribed to our mailing list. Obviously, since things are a little difficult right now, we're not having physical meetups, but we do a twice a month online meetup. And once things are back to normal, just come to one of our meetups, come say hi. We'll be happy to introduce you to the rest of the community as well as our entire team. Uh, as for what GDG is, which was the second question, uh, GDG is the full. It's an acronym for Google Developer Group. Uh, how I would put it is that we are a third party extension of Google in Mumbai, where we conduct these monthly get-togethers for a few talks, some discussions, but mostly meeting like-minded people. We are we are backed by Google India. Uh, we cover a wide variety of topics and technologies, and we help create this mutual sharing and growing together kind of group. We're there on Twitter, we're there on Slack, across a bunch of places where we're a lot of developers all coming together and trying to improve as one. Uh, one of you has asked what are the advantages of college students. So something that I didn't convey, but it's probably important to this entire process, is that I myself am a college student. I started working with Google and the Google Developer Group just after 10th grade. So now I've been with them about 7 to 8 years. So what are the benefits? Well, because of being involved with Google and the Google Developer Groups, I am where I am. I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of opportunities. I got to kickstart my career really early. I met a bunch of people whom I never thought I would even be able to speak with. Uh, there's no easy way to say how helpful it is, other than the fact that the amount of exposure you get, the amount of learning that you undergo, and all the like minded and interesting people that you meet at these Google developer groups, it's beyond your imagination. It's something you would have never thought that just as a college student you get to go on stage and talk in front of a bunch of people. It seems unimaginable, but through a community like this, it's very possible. So I would say the earlier you are, the more beneficial it is for you to join. Our attendees are usually between final year of college right up to 15 or 20 years of experience. And if you try to approach someone who's at that experience level in a daily routine, they're probably not going to have the time to sit down with you and talk to you or mentor you or help you out. But in a forum like this, you can meet up with all kinds of people, and that's going to be extremely beneficial for you. Uh, how did GDG start? Um, GDG, Google started the developer groups back in 2006, but MAD specifically started in 2016. At the time, there was no strong presence of a Google community in Mumbai, and we had a very ironical beginning because we were two students who were designers starting a community for professionals who were developers. So the entire story was very ironic, but the important thing was that we wanted like-minded people to come together to learn and share ideas and help each other grow. And with that spirit, we kind of just reached out to some people we knew at co-working spaces and who were employees in some companies, and we arranged our first event at the Bombay Stock Exchange. We were expecting, optimistically, we were expecting 15 to 20 people to show up, because me and my co-organizer together had reached out to about 10 people. So we were hoping 15 people show up, but we ended up with an audience of 80 people. And each event since then has only been growing. We do this annual large event called DevFest, which is like an all-day tech conference kind of thing. It's larger than our usual events. And at our last DevFest in October 2019, we had like 900 people. So we've really scaled up over the years, even though it started just in 2016. Uh, it's been a long journey and a lot of learnings along the way. But hopefully, when things are open again, we can continue going back to doing what we were doing. Um, one of you asked, what is Agraya? Agraya is the company I work at. Uh, we're based in Mumbai with an office in Malad. We specialize in two things primarily. One is building tech for voice platforms. That is anything from Google Assistant and Alexa to custom voice assistants for brands. And we also specialize in building tech for vernacular India. That is building all kinds of software for people whose first language is not English. Most software nowadays is built first for English and then it's translated into a variety of languages. But building technology for, if targeted at a non-English speaking audience, can look very different. And a good example of this is, look at Amazon or Flipkart. They have something called a shopping cart. But if you look at someone who's grown up in rural India, they're not familiar with what a shopping cart is. We are probably used to it in our day-to-day lives, whether it's in a DMart or a big bazaar. But someone in rural India has probably never heard of the term. So we focus on building tech that's targeted for those kind of people and not targeted for English-speaking users and simply translated after that. How does volunteering help in meetups in a career ahead? Like I mentioned, it's helped me a lot because I started off when I was in 10th, and I have come like a long way since then, primarily because I started volunteering somewhere around 2010. I moved upwards because after volunteering, I got an invitation to speak and then go ahead and launch my own group. So, if you were to ask me how it'll help in a career, I'd say it's complete opposite. There's no way it will not help you, because now I'm in final year and I already have like 6 years of work experience. It sounds impossible, but because I was involved from the community at a very early stage, I got to meet a bunch of interesting people in a variety of positions in life. And as such, I was able to market my skills and my capabilities to them directly rather than having to go through traditional HR channels. I mean, it might, and we have one success story at GDG in Mumbai where someone from the community was building an Android library, and it was a side project. It wasn't meant to be anything serious, but someone from Facebook was there, and we heard about a few months later that the person who built the library had moved to London and was now working at Facebook. So I can't guarantee you that you're gonna land a job like that, but you're definitely going to have some positive impact, whether it's through learning or through meeting new people. Uh, can it be learned at an undergraduate level? I think that's possibly answered because I am at an undergraduate level and I've been doing it since 6 years. It's not something complicated or not rocket science. It's something you can just pick up in an afternoon of reading, because there's no technicality or complexity to design thinking. It's just a matter of changing how you approach problems, uh, moving from a traditional process where we're all used to first coding and then showing it to people, moving from that towards a process where you first talk about your idea to people and then go ahead and code it. So it's just a mentality change. There are lots of ways to do it, but the being able to change that mentality doesn't require a degree or a graduation certificate. Actually, nothing nowadays requires a degree or a graduation certificate. So just undergoing that mentality change is something I'd say even a school student in school can do. So you can definitely do it at an undergraduate level. Cool. So that was the last of the questions. If you have any more, please put them in the comments. If not, I'll be happy to take any over email or Twitter. Cool. Thank you so much and good night.